Today we will be recapping the 2015 sci-fi movie called The Martian, where an astronaut thought to be dead survives alone on Mars for 600 days. So, let's get started. The story begins as the Ares 3 crew spends their Martian day Sol 18, 18th day, performing various tasks on Mars. Mark Watney, the botanist, has a playful banter over the radio with Captain Martinez, who is fixing their Mars ascent vehicle, MAV. The chit-chat annoys everyone and they turn off Mark's radio. Suddenly, Beth Johansson, the computer operator, receives a storm warning, and everyone returns to their Mars lander habitat, HAB, to check the intensity. Their commander, Melissa Lewis, orders to abort the mission and asks Martinez to prepare the MAV for departure. As everyone leaves, Mark locks the HAB. However, the HAB's satellite dish breaks in the storm, striking Mark and sending him miles away. Signal loss and lack of visibility make Mark unreachable. Meanwhile, Martinez informs Lewis that MAV can't hold much longer. She decides to find Mark herself and orders the crew to launch without her. But Beck, the physicist, emphasizes that the storm's intensity would prevent Mark from making out alive. The crew gathers with heavy hearts and launches without Mark. In the meantime, on Earth, NASA announces Mark Watney's death to the public. However, the next day after the storm ends, Mark wakes up in pain as an antenna from the dish has pierced his body. He returns to the HAB, removes his suit and extracts the antenna. Subsequently, he also cleans and stitches his wounds. Afterwards, he takes a shower and logs into the HAB's journal. He starts the recording by explaining the way he survived. He states that the blood and the antenna that was pierced in his body made a bridge in the EVA suit, which stopped oxygen leakage, and he survived. He adds that the HAB has a 31-day lifespan, and Ares 4 will come in about 4 years. So even if he overcomes the lack of water and oxygen, he could still perish due to food shortage, and with that being said, he ends the recording. 2 days later, he wakes up in slight pain and starts making portions of food. As he finishes, a realization kicks him in that the portions will only last 400 days, and he needs more for the remaining 3 years. On Sol 22, he resets the solar panels outside to get energy from the sun and makes a large space in the middle of the HAB by shifting things. During this hustle, a stitch cuts open, and he has to deal with the wound again. After 2 days, he takes the Martian soil and lays it inside the HAB. Furthermore, he creates a fertilizer from the sealed and dried fecal waste of the crew. A week later, he makes lines on the soil and puts the fertilizer as well as the potatoes they had kept for Thanksgiving on it. He also adds some grain juice on the top of potatoes to help growth. On Sol 37, Mark records that he has a recipe that can produce water for the crop. By using his oxygenator to extract hydrogen from the unused hydrazine fuel in the MDV, Mars descent device, and burning it using wood from Martinez's crucifix with carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, he creates water. However, he miscalculates the CO2. He exhales and a small explosion happens, slightly burning his face. After 4 days, he tries again, but this time he wears his helmet and is successful. The next morning, he sees water droplets on the tarpaulin that's surrounding the soil, and after a week, a little sprout emerges. Meanwhile on Earth, NASA arranges Mark's funeral. As the funeral ends, Mars mission director Vincent visits NASA's director Teddy and talks about returning to Mars to retrieve the abandoned equipment. Teddy worries about public attention by showing Mark's body on television, but Vincent suggests framing the mission as bringing back Mark's body as it won't decompose on Mars. He adds that this will help them get funding as well as sympathy. Meanwhile, at NASA's control center, Mindy Park spots altered images of Ares 3's landing site on Sol 18 and Sol 58. She calls Vincent, Teddy, and PR director Annie for a meeting. Vincent assures Mark's survival, but Annie proposes checking with Lewis. Teddy stops them, saying the crew will return to Earth in 10 months and they need to focus. Teddy adds that legally as a governmental institution, they have to release the pictures in 24 hours to the public. He holds a press conference and releases the news of Mark's survival while the reporters bombard him with questions. Back on Mars, Mark logs on Sol 70, where he says that the Ares 4 landing site is 3,200 kilometers away from him, and he needs to be there when they come in 4 years. He connects batteries to the rover he'd used to travel, but the next day while recording he reveals the rover can only travel 35 kilometers, and the batteries need to recharge back in the hab. He adds that it'll take him 50 days to reach the landing site and he'll have to live with life support. However, on Sol 74, while driving, Mark doubles the battery life by scavenging another rover, but mentions he's freezing to death and can't use the heater as it would drain the battery. So he heads back and plans to use radioactive material for warmth. Back on Earth, NASA informs the public that through satellite navigation, they have observed that Mark aims to reach the Ares 4 site, so they'll be launching Ares 4 in 9 months. In the conference room, Mindy informs that Mark has traveled 76 kilometers with brakes to recharge the battery, but they're unsure about water reclamation and the oxygenator due to the 17-minute gap caused by the orbit every 41 hours. Teddy lets her control the satellite to reduce the gap to 4 minutes. After this, Teddy contacts Bruce NG from Jet Propulsion Laboratory to make sure Ares 4 pre-supplies reach Mark in 3 months. Mitch Henderson, Hermes flight director, suggests informing the crew, but Teddy decides to wait until a real rescue plan forms. On Sol 78, Mark harvests 400 potatoes, and with the help of a map also locates the Pathfinder rover lost in 1997. Vincent and Mindy understand his intention, so Vincent visits JPL in California, where they use a duplicate Pathfinder to communicate. However, they can only move the direction of the camera, hence, limited to yes and no responses. The next day, NASA and Mark use hexadecimal to communicate, and Vincent informs Mark about their plan to save him. NASA instructs him to hack the rover so that it can connect to their Pathfinder. He does so, and the communication starts. Vincent praises him for surviving and tells him about trying to send supplies to keep him fed before Ares 4. Mark is relieved and asks about the reaction of his crew upon knowing he's alive. Vincent hesitantly informs him that the crew needs to focus on the mission, and they have not informed them about his survival. Mark gets angry, and Vincent realizes they must tell the crew, hence Mitch sends a video informing the crew about Mark's survival. The crew living in the Hermes for the past 4 months receives the message and feels relieved. However, Lewis blames herself for the whole incident. On Sol 128, he records his crop and says that NASA wants his picture, so he sends one in a funny posture, making everyone laugh. Marks also adds that according to the University of California, he has colonized Mars since he has grown a crop there. At a conference in NASA, Vincent informs Teddy that Mark's food will last till Sol 912, and the pre-supplies will reach on Sol 858 if nothing goes wrong. However, one day, Mark accidentally blows off the airlock, exposing his crops to Mars's environment, which ruins it. His helmet cracks, reducing the oxygen levels, and he duct tapes it. Vincent returns to NASA headquarters and informs everyone that due to the crop damage, Mark can only survive till Sol 609 with rations and the potatoes he has, so the supplies have to be there sooner. On Sol 136, Mark contacts the crew and tells them about the HAB explosion, and humorously mentions Commander Lewis's awful music that survived. He sends his greetings to the crew, making everyone emotional. Mark covers the now blown-off entry with a tarp. Meanwhile on Earth, Rich Purnell, an astrodynamicist in JPL, gets awakened by his boss, who asks about the Mars-to-Earth travel time, and mid-explanation, Rich gets an innovative idea. At JPL, Bruce informs Teddy about costs and another 15-day probe preparation, but Teddy, Vincent, and the team cut it to 13 days, skipping inspection. Meanwhile, Mark has to divide his food to last 4 more days upon NASA's instruction. A few weeks later, the launch starts, and as everyone at NASA and JPL rejoice over the successful launch, a malfunction occurs and the launch fails. Mark asks Vincent about the launch, and he breaks the news, leaving Mark saddened. On Sol 186, Mark sends a message to Lewis and asks to check up on his parents if he dies. He wants her to tell them Mars stories and assure them that he died for a better cause while doing what he loved to do. Following the launch failure, China's chief scientist, Guo Ming, claims that NASA's astronaut will die at this rate. However, Deputy Chief Scientist Zhuo Tao proposes that their Tiangshen booster has enough fuel to be sent to Mars. She adds that giving the booster will cancel Tiangshen, but the positive side is that the world will know of their contribution, and NASA will also help them in their time of need. Guo decides to help them, but asks Tao to keep it a secret among the scientists. This news rejoices Teddy, and a happy Bruce decides to get the new probe ready in 28 days this time. On the other side, the calculations Rich has been doing prove to be correct, and he flies to NASA. During a meeting with Vincent, Annie, Teddy, and Mitch, Rich suggests altering the Hermes course to Mars by Sol 561. They can use the Taiyang-Shen booster to resupply the Hermes before Hermes leaves for Mars. Mark can use the Ares 4 MAV on Mars to reach the crew, with the only downside being that it will take 500 more days for the crew to return home. Teddy is confused between sending Taiyang-Shen to Mark or following Rich's plan. Mitch wants to involve the crew, but Teddy prefers sending Taiyang-Shen to Mark. On the Hermes, Vogel asks Johansson to check messages as he has got an email from his family, but they find out someone has sent them Rich Purnell's maneuver instead. The crew discusses Rich's plan, and Lewis informs them that it would be a mutiny which can result in the loss of their jobs, as well as a ban from entering space. Johansson reassures them that she has calculated everything and they can execute the plan successfully. The team agrees to go with Rich's plan, prioritizing their teammate's life. Lewis then sends a message to NASA praising Rich and informs them about their return to Mars. On Sol 219, Mark logs Rich's plan and acknowledges his rover's limitations for the journey to the Ares 4 site. With NASA's remote guidance as they simultaneously modify the same rover on Earth, Mark opens the rover's roof with a drill. Following Rich's plan, Mitch and Teddy head to CNSA and launch Taiyang-Shen successfully. Back in Hermes, the crew informs their families about their plans. Later, as Taiyang-Shen reaches Hermes, Martinez attaches it successfully, and they begin the journey to Mars's orbit. On Mars, Mark starts packing up, writing small messages on things he'll leave behind and making rations for the next few days. He then covers the rover and creates an air sac with a tarp on top of it. 7 months later, on Sol 461, Mark shuts down the system of HAB and starts his journey, taking breaks to recharge the solar panels as he sleeps under his rover. Laying down, he thinks about being the only one to freely do whatever he wants on Mars. Back on Earth, Bruce demonstrates to Vincent about the MAV that Mark will be using and suggests that he needs to make it lighter. Bruce removes extra sheets and some control panels. He then takes off the metallic top and suggests using a tarp instead. Moreover, he says that Mark has to stay in his EVA suit because the MAV will be operated by Martinez remotely from Hermes. They inform Mark about the MAV's modification and he curses, making Mindy and Vincent wonder about his reaction. On Sol 538, Mark arrives at the site. He logs about their insane plan and the requirement to run faster than any man in space. Afterwards, he modifies the MAV as instructed and removes everything unnecessary. On Sol 561, Mark leaves a note telling the next crew to take care of the rover and enters the MAV. He shaves and then changes into a new EVA suit meant for the upcoming Ares 4 crew members. Mark sits in the MAV and Martinez launches it, but during the launch, MAV's velocity surpasses Hermes' speed. Commander Lewis asks Vogel to make a bomb, blow open an airlock, and release air to slow Hermes' speed. However, it still doesn't help, so Lewis attempts rescue using a tethered manned maneuvering unit. Beck suggests that he can do it, but Lewis says that she doesn't want to lose another member and goes herself. But unfortunately, the rope's length falls short. Watney punctures his EVA suit's glove, using the escaping air to push himself to Lewis. With a lot of speed control, Mark and Lewis finally get a hold of each other and successfully meet the crew members, making the crew cry in happiness. Lewis announces Mark's arrival, and cheers of happiness erupt everywhere. In the end, Mark becomes an instructor teaching students about Mars, while other members join their families. Martinez remains a member of the Ares 5, and NASA successfully launches the mission. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.